I call that the slow drift of
Mm.
comfort. And I think when we slowly drift into an area of comfort, I think that's where our ego gets involved. And ego, Daryl Strawberry once told me, ego stands for easing God out.
Welcome to the Jamodi Podcast. We are all surrounded by amazing coaches and leaders. So let's get an inside look at not just what they do, but how they do what they do. After all, becoming the best versions of ourselves is Jamodi, just a matter of doing it. Today we are joined by the host of the Sports Spectrum podcast, Jason Romano. For 17 years, he was an Emmy Award-winning producer and senior manager at ESPN. He has created and produced content for shows such as SportsCenter, Monday Night Football, Sunday NFL Countdown, College Game Day, and many more. In 2017, Jason took a leap of faith from ESPN to become the director of media with Sports Spectrum and the host of the popular Sports Spectrum podcast. Before we hear from Jason, take a moment to subscribe to our podcast and follow us on social media at Jamodi Podcast.
There he is. Hey, Matt.
What's up, man?
How you doing, buddy?
Oh, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Let's switch sides here. How about that?
That's what I was saying. Like, how cool is this? This is somebody I've already talked to, but just in a different way. I get to grill you a little bit now.
I like it. I'm ready to roll, man. This is great.
First of all, just thank you so much for giving up your time and doing this with me, because I know how busy you are and all the different things you're part of. So this is just an honor for me.
Well, you're welcome. I'm excited to talk to you, and I was grateful to get to know you when we recorded our podcast for Sports Spectrum, and now we get to do this. So
that's
I'm excited.
Right.
Hey, buddy.
Well, this is really cool for me because I usually talk to coaches, and so their perspectives and things, and usually goes towards basketball. But with you, it's almost as if I'm talking to hundreds of coaches because of the people that you've interviewed and who you've talked to, and with ESPN, who you've been around, and the experiences that you've had. And we'll talk a little bit about Sports Spectrum podcast at the end. But I just think you get to draw on, so many of those experiences and from those people.
Yeah, that's really well said, because it's true. I mean, I guess I didn't even take it seriously enough, if that's the right word to say, when I was at ESPN, on the people that I got to spend time with. I just thought it was a neat thing to spend time with famous people. But then, when you put your thoughts together, and that was part of what my second book was, and just thinking about all of the different people that I spent time with, the lessons that I learned, the impact that they had. And now, I mean, talking to coaches at least once a week, I'm going to talk to a coach on some level of college or pro in all the different sports. And that's, I see it as invaluable. Even like today, we released a podcast with the head coach of the women's basketball team at Charleston Southern. They went 2-25 this year or something. But somebody recommended her to me, and I thought, you know what? I want to talk to somebody who's in the middle of the downtimes, if you will, in the middle of it, not coming out on the other end. And hey, what was it like to be 2-25? But just, how are you trusting in God? How are you still leading? How are you still motivating? How are you building a culture? It was our first year with this team. How are you building a culture when you know that you just went through a really difficult season? There's so many lessons to learn in that, just as much as there is when you have Scott Drew on after winning a national championship,
Yeah, you're right on the money, because you never or rarely hear from that person when they're in the moment. It's always they've come out, they've had success, and let's reflect back. And everybody loves to reflect back after they've come out of it. But man, that I'm going to definitely listen to that one, because to all of us as especially at the high school level, when kids graduate, kids are moving and doing things so quick. I mean, a little bit at the college level, but you still can recruit and bring in the next wave. But at a high school where you're not recruiting and you're just whoever comes, it could turn on you like that. Even with a great culture, if you don't have the talent, like I was talking with a former state champion coach down here. And I asked him, "How do you win state, coach?" He said, "We're jockeys. The best horses win." And there's a part of that's true. Obviously, just because you have great players doesn't mean you automatically win. You still have to have a good culture and everything. But yeah, it's just such an interesting perspective she must have being in it in that moment.
Yeah, and coming from, she was an assistant at, I think it was Alabama and a couple other, pretty big programs. So to go to Charleston Southern, to get her first chance to be a head coach, and then to go like, I mean, it's really hard to lose that many games,
Yeah.
in a program, but at the same time to find, you know, the blessing amidst the difficult times. And I think it was cool. I'd love to look back in a few years and see her, winning, a conference championship or something, and be like, remember, because I
Yeah.
think, like you say, I think a lot of people, when they're going through struggles, not just as coaches, but in life, we don't want to talk about it when we're going through it. We're just trying to stay afloat, keep our head above water. And it's on the other side when we can say, oh, you know what, I made it through it, and this is what happened. But when you talk to people in the midst, I think that's why I love hearing from people. You don't hear it that much, but I would love to hear from more believers in sports right after, not necessarily the second after,
Yeah.
but right after they lost, right? And just say, tell me about what's been going on here, with you, and how you're feeling, and how are you still trusting in God, and where's the joy that you find when you face trials of many kind. Like, I don't love to see people suffer or have difficult
I
moments.
love to see people fail. Like
I do. It's amazing. Failures are what it's all about. No, but I think, to be honest, Matt, though, this, that's where the lessons
yeah.
are truly learned. I mean,
Yeah.
you went through it, obviously, with
It's where
Baylor.
the most inspiring
Yeah.
moments come out, because you're right. Like when the NBA coach wins the title, that press conference right after, not that special. You're going to thank the people. You're going to talk about this and that. But the losing coach, when Popovich sits up there and says, "Man, hats off to them," and he goes through how special his guys are, and there's not an ounce of frustration or anger or how could they? We've been wronged. This and that. Like that stuff's inspiring. So great job, man, getting somebody like that on.
Yeah. Appreciate you.
And I got to imagine too. Sorry, I don't mean to keep going back. That she has to define success in a different way. Because if you're just defining it by wins and losses, well, crap, 2-25, you didn't do it. But you gotta go and get creative, right, as a coach, and find different areas. Hey, today or last week we were here, and now we're at this moment, and that's success, and start and keep building on that.
Yeah, I think sometimes when you're 2-25, or again, I think that was the record. It might have been even
Sure.
worse, but I think it's kind of, you as a coach, I have to imagine you would, sort of compare it to anything when you're first starting up. Like, she's in her first year, and so you're first building a house, and you have to have the foundation correct before you can have the fine, fancy, shiny house with all the people come in and have dinner and hang out and party. Like, you can't do that until you really tear it apart. You go back to the foundation and you try to put it together. And in the midst of that, if you take a picture of just that foundation, what do you see? You
Yeah.
see nothing. You see just the foundation, and there's no house, and there's like, well, what is that? This is kind of, even just the other day at my house, my wife ripped up a bunch of things in the front yard, that were just not growing well, like some weeds and some old, trees and stuff, and she ripped them up, and they had the guy come and take them out, and then you look at it right now, literally right now, and it's just a bunch of dirt. But at some point, somebody's going to come in and plant these new trees and hopefully make them look a lot better. And in a couple years, you'll see it, and you see that looks pretty good.
Hmm.
And yeah, it was a process of a couple years to get to that point. But appreciating the success of the blessing, and the fact that you ripped out the roots, you ripped out the weeds, and you pull the weeds out and you try to start afresh. And I think when I think about Clarice, that's her name, Clarice Garcia, she is, probably going through that right now. Like, you can't see what's going on right now because you saw 2-25, and that's not fun to be a part of. But this is just, hopefully, I think in her eyes, she was talking about, this is the beginning, and this is part of the success, because someday, hopefully, that's going to improve and come to a place where you can see the shiny new house and not just the foundation. So I don't know. I think when I think about coaches and who are going through difficult seasons and are allowed to build a program, because that's a lot of people don't get enough time if you
that
have
was going to be my next point,
right?
yeah, is that I hope she is given the amount of time, because it's almost as if there's people in charge that have this win now mentality at all costs.
Yeah.
But those of us in it know that that's just not how success or growth happens. It's gradual, it's messy, and it takes time, and you're going to have peaks and valleys. And so you got to, hopefully she has those people in her camp that are going to, hey, 2 and 25, but we acknowledge the growth and we're excited about the direction. And there's not this, but you've got to do it in a year. Hopefully she has that time.
Matt, I mean, this. We live in a society that is, now. And if you don't do it, I'll move on and find somebody else to make it now. And, I've always, that's why I think I'm not trying to go back to the 80s or the 90s when I was growing up, but I appreciated those times because you gave guys time to try and build something. Now, if you get 5 to 8 years and you're still 2 and 25, clearly something's not right and it's not going to work out.
Oh, yeah.
But you got to give guys a chance to grow. I mean, I think of managers in baseball. I think of head coaches in basketball. I mean, guys were there a long time back in the 80s and the early 90s because they were given a chance to build their program and to see it through, and even to rebuild the program if it has a couple of bad years. You didn't just bail and move on. And today it's very rare to see, I don't know, just to see people who are in charge of that kind of thing, like hiring, give other people, a sort of long-term chance. They want to see success, and I get it. What you want to see wins, and you want to, that brings in more opportunities for, funding and money and all that stuff. And that's an important part. So I get it. But I wish and I hope that people like Clarice and others get the time that they need. Think about your old coach, right? Scott Drew needed that time to build that program. Baylor gave it to him, and now they're reaping in so many ways the benefits of being patient with Scott Drew, as he had a plan in place. And it took him a while to get to that plan and fully see it manifest into a championship program. But it just doesn't happen a lot in sports. I wish it did. I wish that people were given a little bit more time, because you see when a coach gets fired, especially in a league like the NFL, very quickly are they turned around and picked up by somebody else. Yeah. And so it's like, we just needed a change with our program. Well, did you? Because that team just snatched up your old coach really quick. So
after 1 year,
after a year or after 2 years or whatever it is. So yeah, I hope that we can get to a point where we could just be a little bit more patient. A little bit more.
That's a great point, though, because think of Coach Drew is a good example. Coach K's first 4 years at Duke weren't great. But we only focus on, or we only listen to the last 40 years, but not those first 4. How many, and I don't know, this is an interesting, how many Coach K's or future Coach K's aren't given the proper time? Where, man, if that guy with his ability to lead, and if he was given more time, we could have more of the, like Scott Drew's, that you see his brilliance now. When we were 8-21, or even the next year after us, where they didn't win hardly any either, like if they would have had him on just such a short leash or time frame, we wouldn't have seen this, 2 years ago winning the championship.
Yeah, it's just, I hope that the leashes can be a little bit longer. I'm even thinking, when you mentioned Scott Drew, I was thinking of, like Bill Belichick was once a head coach with the Cleveland Browns.
Yep.
And they didn't give him a whole lot of time. They gave him 4 years, which in the NFL, I guess, is enough time. And he had some good seasons. He didn't win a Super Bowl. But you think Cleveland, in 2001 and 2 and all the way into 2020 are thinking, man, what if we just stayed the course with him for a few more years? What could have happened?
You mean we had that guy?
And we let him go, It's like Portland thinking, we could have drafted Michael Jordan, but we went with Sam Bowie instead. Any chances we could have, thought about that just a little bit longer? So anyways, what ifs is the beautiful
Mhm.
thing of sports. Uh, and but I realize now it's not just as being a fan, which I have been for so many years, but these are people's livelihoods, and they invest so much into this as a coach, as an athlete, as a player, as front office people, that nobody's looking to do this to try and get fired. They're doing this to try and succeed and to have that opportunity to produce.
That's a good point. Not many coaches go into it going, yeah, probably just a year or two here, you know. But
Maybe some of the
yeah.
smaller schools,
Or stepping
especially
stones.
assistant,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
assistant coaches, I think, are looking,
Yeah.
hey, I want to do the best I can with what I have right now, but I'm also thinking about what this could mean for the next opportunity, right? I think a
Yep.
lot of assistants have to be having that mindset. But I think the head coaches aren't thinking that way.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're not, hey, I'm just here for a year. I'll move on to something else
If
next
I
year.
get fired, probably will get fired. No problem. Like, no,
Oh,
yeah. I think everybody has that optimism.
The Jamodi podcast is powered by Sideline Interactive. Sideline Interactive is the leading manufacturer for high-quality, innovative scoring tables and LED video display boards that help coaches and schools bring more excitement to fans, create huge fundraising opportunities, and make their jobs easier. Visit sidelineinteractive.com to check out their amazing products.
So I usually get to ask this question to coaches that because I feel like successful people in any field, and that to me, that's who you are as well. Your time with ESPN, and
yeah.
then and now what you're doing with Sports Spectrum. I mean, the daily habits of successful people have always been really interesting to me. So you and I both have the same amount of time every day. What daily habits set you up for success?
Yeah, during the day or during the week, I think it's different than the weekends. And that includes pretty much everything. The weekends for me, other than church, which is an important part of my life on Sundays, I don't have a fixed schedule of I have to do this and this and this, other than kind of my devotional time and my time with the Lord. But during the week, it's pretty set in stone what I do. And my wife kind of makes fun of me about, you just do the same thing every day. And I'm like, yeah, that's what I want to do. That's what I think makes me the best version of myself. I wake up at 5:30 every morning, Matt, and the very first thing I do is I go and I jump on my treadmill for about a half hour, and I just catch up on sports in that realm. I think it might be a little different than some people of faith who might dive right into God's word at that moment. For me, I'm just trying to wake up, get my brain moving. And so I'll catch up on whatever happened the night before in sports, which is a part of my job as well. I need to know what's going on. I don't stay up late the night before. I'm usually up till about 9:30 or 10 o'clock on the
So the
Eastern.
Mavs Suns games that start at 9 o'clock, hard to.
No, I'm not watching it. I'm not watching it. I might watch I'll be honest with you. I might watch the NBA finals, but those games start at 9:50 Eastern. So they're going to get over at midnight. And listen, I'm interested in them. But guess what happens if I wake up at 5:30, I go to YouTube and I watch the 20-minute version of the finals? I didn't miss anything. I get the idea. I'm big on watching live events as they happen. So I'm not saying that's just what I do. But I remember learning that a little bit from my time with Mike and Mike in the morning at ESPN, because Greeny and Golick, they couldn't stay up till midnight and then turn around at 4 a.m. and get up every single day for an entire year and go on 4 hours of sleep and try to be the best broadcasters that they could be. So they would catch up in the morning on what they missed the night before. And the people that they were talking to never knew that they weren't doing that. And so I understood that, listen, I'm later in my 40s now, so I think I'm much different than I was when I was in my 20s or 30s. Regarding that, I would stay up late. Who cares? Now I try to get the same 7 to 8 hours of sleep a night. Just I feel like that makes me the most productive the next day, and I get to catch up on those games and watch highlights. And YouTube does a wonderful job of taking a full NBA game and condensing it down to 10 minutes, and you don't miss anything. And so I'll watch those games and catch up on them the next morning. And then when I'm done with that, I like to get outside. I know this is kind of maybe twofold here. Like, why would you go for a walk on your treadmill and then go for a walk outside? The treadmill part is really just me moving while I'm watching the updates of the games. But then I get outside, especially this time of year where it's warmer here in the Northeast, and I go for about a 45-minute walk. And usually at that point outside, I'm just it helps to get exercise and get the blood flowing, but I like that time alone. Sometimes I'm praying, sometimes I'm listening to a sermon or the Bible app reading to me. A lot of times I'm just listening to a podcast like this, and I'll walk for 40 minutes and just kind of escape a little bit. And if there's a lesson or something I'm listening in a podcast that I need to, I'll put it in my phone. Then I come back, I have my breakfast, which is usually a protein shake every day, go shower, and then I come into my office where I'm sitting right now, and I spend about 30 to 40 minutes every day with the Lord. And my time with God is reading His Word, doing devotionals. I actually have a really cool Bible in a Year book that I'm doing called the Bible Recap, and that has a wonderful I guess, way of explaining what you just read. So it gives you the devotionals in the Bible to read, and then it tells you what you read. So I go through that. I listen to the Bible, I read the Bible, and then when I'm done and I'll finish praying. It's usually about 8:30, 8:45, and I start my day at work.
Yeah.
Which is here at home in my office. But I feel like when I enter my office after I finish my time with God, it's work, and this is where I come. And when I leave the office, that's like leaving my desk at a regular job and going to get food or going to the bathroom or whatever. But this is my job. This is where, and I need to do it here. I don't like taking my laptop and going to Starbucks or going downstairs and sitting on the porch on a sunny day. I'd love to do that, but I'm much less productive because I'm less focused. And that's kind of my day, really. And I finish up usually around 5 o'clock and close the laptop and try to not worry about work after that. Occasionally, I'll record podcasts and do some interviews in the evening, but I like to have that time be away from work and focused on, what are we having for dinner, spending time with my wife, spending time with my daughter, going to see her play softball, which is what I've been doing all week this week. She has games every day this week. So I finish up, I get in the car and I go watch her play. And I love that. And then if I can watch one of the early games, Matt, in the evening, I'll watch it. Otherwise, I just kind of hang out and then we do it again the next day. And that's what helps me be productive.
I love that you said about waking up in the morning and not necessarily immediately getting into the word,
Yeah.
because you and I are so much alike in that if I get up around the same time, not necessarily because I want to, but with school and weight room stuff with our team in the morning, making sure my stepson is there on time because we go to the same place.
Yeah.
But if I was to get up on my own at 5:30 and go straight to the Bible, which you do hear a lot of people say that's the first thing that I do, and that's great. Yeah, I get a cup of coffee and I open up the Word. I am still asleep at that time. The odds of me actually like in it and really getting deep, I don't know. I think doing something like you where I'm moving, and then and catching up on whatever, even listening to something or watching something, that makes a lot of sense. And that's kind of freeing too. I think sometimes we hear these successful people or pastors or athletes that they get up and they hit the word first, then you kind of feel like, man, well, what's wrong with me if I'm not doing it that way? I don't think I God's not up there going, hey, you missed 5:30. You got me at 10. Like, no, I think the whole idea is the daily practice,
Yeah.
and when it works.
Yeah, it's a relationship, right?
Yep.
When you're talking about your faith and your walk with the Lord. So I'm not trying to slot it as okay, it's 8 to 8:30 every day. That's my time with God, and I'm done. Like I don't want that to be it either. Obviously, I think it's a process throughout the day. It's something might pop up on social media that I'll see. I'll just be kind of reminded to pause for a minute and just pray and thank the Lord at that moment. So it's a daily thing of every single day. But yeah, I used to be that guy that would wake up at 5:30, and I don't drink coffee, by the way, Matt. So I'm not like I'm waking up and throwing caffeine into my system. I just don't drink coffee. So I'm a water guy. I drink a bottle of water the second I wake up. I go into the bathroom and I just chug a full bottle of water to kind of a buddy told me that, we're never more dehydrated than when we wake up in the morning. So he said, drink a bottle of water and you'll feel like in many ways like you're full, because you get your body replenished. And so I do that every single day. I leave a bottle of water right next to the sink in the bathroom, and I just drink it every morning.
Room temperature?
Yep, room temperature. Yeah, I can't get that cold. Not too cold.
Yeah.
But I just down it, and that kind of wakes me up. And for me, I think I felt guilty initially that, well, Jason, you're a Christian and you're supposed to follow Jesus, so the first thing you should do every day is give him all the glory. And yes, I think there's something you should do, that idea of first things first, and placing God first in your life. But if God's first in my life, I don't think it means the very first thing I have to do is to just jump in God's word and try to read it and understand it when my brain is not fully awake yet. I do think there is a moment of thanksgiving when I wake up, that I realize, okay, it's another day. There are people who aren't going to wake up today, and I just did. So I think on a very basic level, there's a thankfulness to God. Give thanks to the Lord in all circumstances, for he is good. Trying to do that. But then it's like, all right, I can just kind of escape a little bit, get some exercise, wake myself up, and then get that time in with him, when it's ready. Again, the weekends are a little different. So I sleep in a little bit, which is like 7:00. Wow, sleeping in.
You're crazy.
Remember when we were in high school, it was like sleeping in was noon.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen anymore. But 7 a.m. might sleep in. And again, that's different. Sometimes I'll get up and I'll go for a walk. Sometimes we might have an activity that we're going to attend, and finding or being intentional about that time with the Lord, I find to be a little bit more difficult on the weekends. It might be a mindset more than it is actual time that I have. And then Sundays, Sundays is a non-negotiable in our household. And we made that as part of, our family dynamic when Sarah, my daughter, was 2. So she's been going to church, and she knows Sundays is church. Unless she has something else that's pressing, whether we're visiting family or on vacation, we're always going to be at church on Sunday. And that's never been like a real issue or a problem in our family. So Sundays is church, and once church is done, it's Sunday fun day. Let's figure it out what we're going to do.
How did you guys deal with those COVID, the real COVID times where it was all online, and we're sitting in our living room? Were you able to kind of keep the same respect for that time and what you were doing as you did when you were going in person?
Yeah, for the rest of my rhythms, everything kind of stayed the same, thankfully. But for Sunday church, just like everybody else, we went to an online Zoom format for a long time. I would say at least 3 months, maybe longer. And then when we did reopen, all of the chairs were socially distanced, and it was just a weird look within our church building. And you had to sign up online just to be able to come. We had to turn people away if we were exceeding the capacity, within our church building. So things like that, we hated to do, but I don't know. I think the first month I was just happy to see church online because it was familiar. And I think people were fine with it for maybe 2 months. And I remember, when did the pandemic hit? March 12th, I think it was. And then Easter was like April 25th, 2 years ago. So by that time on Easter, I think we were still okay with Zoom, but it was right after that, maybe in early May, where we were kind of done with it. And we saw that. We saw our numbers at our church. I think we had like 2,800 views of our Easter service on 2020 on Facebook. That's an insane amount of views for our church that has about 300 people, which is what our church is. But then very quickly, within 3-4 weeks, those views went down to maybe 300 to 400 views on Facebook. And we obviously, Easter is your mountaintop experience, but when you go that far down, we started to realize people are tired, and it's very hard. I couldn't worship at home watching church. When we would have our worship team play a couple songs online. I wasn't at home standing up, lifting my hands and praising God. I just couldn't do it. The service, I should say, the message was fine. Give me my notebook. I always have a notebook in my Bible, and I take notes, and I can see a message whether I'm home or at the church and get something from it. But the totality of what church is meant to be, the community, the worship, the music, the experience of going to church, you could not replicate that trying to do it at home. We made the best of what we could. I think everybody did. But I got to tell you, that first service when we were back in person, as weird as it was, and we were wearing masks, obviously trying to do the right thing at that time, it was just wonderful to be back in person, in the presence of God and the presence of others. But yeah, I mean, I think it was like everybody, Matt. You just tried to make the best of a situation that was so. I wouldn't even say it was difficult. It was just so unfamiliar. We didn't know what to do. That's something none of us have ever had to do in our entire lives, was separate from each other. And here we were trying to figure that out.
Yeah, we fell into the trap of, I think a lot of people did, of I'm in my PJs, I've got my coffee, I've got my dog by me, I have my phone, and fast forward, okay, worship's on, all right, get message, get through it, done. And then got to a point where there's a comfortability there that if you're not careful, I mean, I had tons of friends that stayed online way longer than they needed to. Church is back, we're going back, and they're, I like online. And there's a part of that, you mentioned the community piece, that if you're not careful, you can, and that isolation comes, the comfortability. I don't know. I felt that. I did feel the nag to get back, or the want to get back in person, but then the danger of, this is just fine. I can be comfortable. I think a lot of people felt that.
I call that the slow drift of comfort. And I think when we slowly drift into an area of comfort, that's where I think that's where, our ego gets involved. And ego, Daryl Strawberry once told me, ego stands for easing God out. And I thought, that's really good, because when our ego gets in the way, that's the Bible talks about that, right? It's about God and Jesus increasing and us decreasing. And when we increase ourselves, we're decreasing Christ. We're decreasing God in our lives. So we're easing God out. Our ego gets in the way. But I think a lot of people, and we saw this at our church too, got comfortable with comfort and just said, you know what? I can do this without church. I guess I really don't need it. But where are you spiritually? Where are you growing? What's the sanctification process look like? What does the fruit of the Spirit in your life look like? My guess is for some of those people, it may not look the same that it looked before the pandemic. And here I am doing my absolute very best not to judge anybody, because I don't want to judge anyone on their personal journeys. But as a church leader, and I am one of those at my church, I'm one of the elders in my church, we saw a very large decline in a large group of people that just decided not to return back to church, not just to our church, but to any church. And that made me really sad. I get there were some people that were genuinely afraid to get back in person because of the pandemic. And I respect that. But at some point, if you're going to go to a restaurant and you're going to go to a grocery store, and
unless you're staying home all the time. Yeah.
Correct. And if that's where I kind of will call out the hypocrisy a little bit and say, are you really scared to go to church? Or are you scared, or are you just lazy to not go to church because you're going everywhere else?
Yeah.
You're at concerts and you're at sporting events where there's thousands of people, but you're not going to go to a church. So that's when I would say something spiritually is taking place within you, a little bit of a slow fade, a slow drift that needs to be tended to. But at the same time, we also saw a lot of new people that came into our church that hadn't been going to church and were just craving for, I think, community, trying to grow spiritually, because the pandemic was one of those moments that none of us will ever forget, in the sense of it starts forcing us to question mortality in life after this world. Like, what is heaven and hell, and who is God, and why would a good God, have a pandemic? There's just questions being asked. And I think a church, if it's a biblically minded, Jesus-centered church, they're going to be able to at least encourage and love and help those people who have those questions.
Coaches, the Jamodi podcast is powered by Shoot 360. The future of basketball has arrived in Dallas-Fort Worth. Shoot 360 combines the latest sports technology with the fundamentals of basketball skill development. The result is a one-of-a-kind video game-like basketball program designed to improve your shooting, dribbling, and passing. Visit shoot360dfw.com to learn more and register for your free 1-hour workout evaluation. Shoot360, the future of basketball is here. You've been able to be in the same room with or talk to so many great leaders, whether it's coaches, ownership in some places, or athletes. And what are some qualities that you just see in these great leaders that they maybe have in common?
I think the number one quality I see in almost every leader is their ability to put their ego aside and serve. And I don't mean serving in the sense of, where I'm spending time with a coach at ESPN and we're going through the cafeteria and they're just, you know, carrying everybody's tray, to the table. I don't mean it in that way, but I mean it. I think most of the coaches that I've seen that are great leaders would be willing to do that though. But I think what I mean by serving is they're looking out for other people's interests before themselves. And that's hard to find. I've seen a lot of great people who aren't necessarily great leaders because they have sort of a boss mentality, meaning I'm the one I'm in charge. I'm the militant leader here, and you pay attention and focus on everything I have to say. There are times, I think, albeit few, times where maybe you need to exercise that a little bit if the team is really out of control.
Yeah, in chaos. Yeah, in chaos.
Absolutely. Listen, I'm trying to help you guys here. But I think the great leaders and all the ones that I've spent time with, especially the high level coaches, are always looking about others first, about culture, about serving, about making it about the team, about playing for the name on the front of the jersey, about coaching for the name on that front of that uniform that those players are wearing, not the name on the back, not the name that, brings you glory, but brings everybody else glory. And I love talking to those coaches. I will never forget spending time with Tony Dungy at ESPN, and even time with Coach Dungy since. I was with him a couple weeks ago in Minneapolis, and you talk about a humble person, a humble spirit, gentle, kind, but also when he needs to say something, he'll speak up and say it. And when he does, everybody commands. He commands that respect, and everybody listens, and everybody pays attention. And so that's a unique quality, right? To be humble and kind. And, Monty Williams has those traits with the Phoenix Suns. When we talked to Monty a couple times last year, we featured him in our magazine at Sports Spectrum. When we went and spent time with him, and when I got to talk to him, I mean, to me, he is a caricature of Coach Tony Dungy. And they're different sports, but they're great leaders who bring the best out of their players. But how do they do that? By making sure those players know that coach cares for them. That coach is also trying to win games and trying to do his job, but he cares for his players. And I can't tell you a single player that played for Tony Dungy and right now Monty Williams that comes back and says, I don't know about that guy. Not a big fan of him.
Yeah.
Every single person that I have talked to says that person impacted me on a level much bigger than the sport I was playing. To me, that's what makes a great leader and a great coach.
It's really cool to see those guys having, obviously they're pro coaches, so they have a platform, but there's a bunch of pro coaches out there, and so a lot of guys that you don't hear from. And when the Suns were doing so well last year, for people to get to see that, man, at the highest level, I think it's huge for coaches to get to see at the highest level, there are guys that aren't demeaning, but they can be demanding in a respectful way that gets the most out of their team. And just love to see those guys having the impact and the platform they have now.
Yeah, and to think about like a guy like Monty Williams, who's coaching, a veteran like Chris Paul, who's basically another coach, on the floor. And yet Chris Paul says, that's my coach. I respect him. I listen to him. I want to learn from him. That tells you everything you want to know about Monty Williams when he's got a veteran like Chris Paul going all in as that's my coach, that's my guy. And then you have, the young people around him. That I remember last year in the finals when they were playing Milwaukee, there was a moment, I think in game 1 or game 2, when Monty, I think was mic'd up, or they had a mic real close to him. And he had this moment with DeAndre Ayton where he was kind of frustrated. And he was in his chair, and he had his head down, and Monty just comes over to him and puts his hands on DeAndre's shoulders and puts his head kind of connected to DeAndre's head, and just looks at him and says, "You're going to be okay. We got this. I'm here with you. I'm here to help you." Like, it was just encouraging. It had nothing to do with basketball. It was just him coming and saying, "Listen, I understand what you're feeling right now. I'm not here to tell you what you're doing right and wrong. I'm here to tell you that I love you. And then, now go out there and do the best that you can and give your best for this team and for me." And that was a moment, right, where you say, wow, that is how I wish every single coach could be. Now, are there different styles that still work and can be successful as coaches? Absolutely. You mentioned Greg Popovich, much different style, right? Much
But
different.
players love him. I mean, a lot of players do love him.
him.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. He seems to be so stoic, very Bill Belichick like, right? Very serious. Everything is about sports and about the game and about the team. But when you get players behind closed doors who talk about their coach, and you talk to them on a different level, they love those guys. I've talked to so many players who played for Coach Belichick, and they cannot stress how great of a coach he is to play for, which might shock a lot of people when they hear that. Like, wait a minute, he's kind of militant in some ways, but behind closed doors, they're going to battle for this guy. So he must be showing them something that would want those players to go to battle for him. Because if you lose your locker room and you lose your players, why even bother? So something's connecting on a level that we're not seeing publicly with some of these coaches, and then others like Monty Williams, like Tony Dungy, you're seeing it in a different light, but it's the same connectivity.
It's a great point that we might not, in the little clips that Greg Popovich was famous for, like the end of quarter talks where he gives one-word answers.
Yeah, those reporter interviews, my gosh.
we might not be seeing all of the culture, relationships,
Correct.
and things that he builds in those moments.
Which, by the way, Monty Williams is a disciple, for lack of a better word, of Greg Popovich. Monty Williams was an assistant with Greg and played for him when he was with the Spurs. So you'd think, well, if he played for him and he's a disciple of his in terms of how he coaches, wouldn't they be the same kind of person? And yet, no, Monty's just being himself, that servant mindset. But I'm sure there's also other character traits that maybe we don't see in a 2-minute social media clip that has these guys succeeding the way that they are.
I think that's a great reminder for coaches that, or probably more like me at the high school level, or guys starting out that have these aspirations to get. I'm very happy where I am, so I don't have those aspirations. But some guys that are younger, starting out, that want to move up, want to be at the college level, maybe even the pro level, it's encouraging, because I think sometimes you see these guys like Pop and Belichick and Monty, that you're like, okay, when I get there, then I will be a servant leader. I'll get my ego in check and I'll do things the way they're doing. But I would imagine you go back in time, they were probably doing it that way starting out. So it's like a decision that we have to make now to put our ego aside. I love that. I think ego and servant leadership, like you said, are so connected. Yes. Between those two. I'm imagining those guys were doing it when they were starting out.
So you talk about Monty, you talk about Greg Popovich, you talk about all these legends, any sport, whether it's Tony Dungy or Bill Belichick, they all started somewhere, and they all didn't have immediate success when they started. Maybe on occasion you might get someone who comes in and wins 12 games and a Super Bowl in their first year, but somewhere along the lines, they had to have started somewhere and probably didn't have a lot of success in the very beginning of that start. And so talking to Clarice on our show and talking to others, you realize that's where it's got to be laid, the foundation. You begin to look at what it is that you want to build, what type of team, what type of culture, what type of environment do you want to cultivate when these players are coming in, and how do you want them to see you? How do you want them to be able to see each other? That starts now, whether you're winning 2 games or 18 games, and then you start to build on that. And you start to learn from that. And I think everybody that you talk to had those moments early on when they weren't, in the limelight winning championships. They were trying to grind it out and do the best that they can to learn as much as they could to prepare themselves So when those opportunities do come, they can take advantage of them.
And to encourage the coaches that are trying to be transformational and not just transactional, to encourage
Right.
them. I think
Yes.
there's way more of them out there than we sometimes realize, because just like any part of the news or anything, we just see the bad stuff most of the time. We're the things that are thrown in our face are the coaches getting in fights, in arena, like those things are coaches doing inappropriate things with players.
Sure.
I mean, those are the small part of the vast majority of coaches that I do feel like are trying to be that way. So if you're ever feeling like you're alone, or man, there's just not a lot of guys that are trying to do things the way I'm doing, I just encourage you. I think there's a lot more. We just don't like. I love the fact that I think your podcast, one of the missions is to highlight those people that you might never heard of before, like that coach from Charleston
Southern.
Southern. I would
Yeah.
never heard of her, but
Right.
that's an inspiring story of somebody trying to do things the right way in that arena. But there's just more people out there than we realize.
Yeah. I think sometimes you look at, um, the job as a coach can be thankless on pretty much every level. When your team does bad, you are to blame. You take the credit, for the wins, or the team in many cases, or the players take the credit for the wins. And when the losses happen, the coaches take the blame. And that's on every level.
Mm.
I'm even remembering, I haven't coached a lot in my journey, but I did coach a little bit with my daughter in Little League softball. And this is Little League softball. So, like, why would we talk about Little League softball when we're talking about Tony Dungy and we're talking about Monty Williams? But I hope whoever's listening, maybe that's what their coaching job is right now.
Mhm.
They don't have a full-time job coaching at a big level, or even a medium size or a small level. They're coaching Little League softball, right? Very thankless when you have kids that you don't even know if they can catch the ball or throw the ball. But guess what? It's culture, it's environment, it's having fun. And sometimes, I'm guessing, even for you, Matt, and other coaches, you have to go back to that Little League softball mindset when you're going into a practice or preparing for an opponent, and not get so caught up in taking it so seriously, which obviously you want to win every game, but take yourself back to what it was like to coach those 8 and 9-year-old little kids who are just trying. They're there because they want to have fun. And you get the occasional competitive kid or two at that age, but for the most part, they're just there to learn, have fun. They're running around, chasing each other in the middle of practice, and you're like, all right, come on back. But it's just this genuine joy and fun when you're younger. And I think sometimes with coaches, they can lose that the higher the level is that they get to.
No doubt. You totally get blinded by record, even something like legacy which there's so many positive to wanting to leave a legacy. But
Yes.
if it's in the wrong thing, and I've gone through that at Faith, where there's a couple of moments when I realized these things that I'm really want us to be about as a program, that I'm hoping people remember about us, they don't matter.
Yeah.
When you realize some of those moments, then it gets back to the purity of sport, of
Mm.
being a part of a team. And I think those are, I mean, even when you get into big playoff moments, or little league softball with little, allowing them just to enjoy the moment, and
Yes.
reminding them that the game will end and life will go on. Yeah, I think those are great points.
Yeah, I think at the professional level, that's a much harder thing because you're getting paid and it's your job. But I still think at the same time, I remember talking just recently to an NFL offensive lineman named Josh Wells, who is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offensive lineman. He won a Super Bowl a couple years ago, and that was the COVID year, if you remember, when the Buccaneers won and they beat the Chiefs. But Josh, they played that game at home, and Josh told me on our show, he said, "You know what, Jason? I don't know a lot of people know this, but we won the Super Bowl." And we had accomplished everything you hope to accomplish. It's the dream of every athlete. And I couldn't believe that I went from being a walk-on at James Madison to an undrafted free agent who just making it to the NFL, much less now in my 7th year and then winning a Super Bowl. He's like, and guess what I did that night? I went home after I hung out with the guys and celebrated. And then I woke up at 8 o'clock in the morning and I was at the park with my two kids and they were on the swing set and I was pushing them at 8:30 in the morning the day after I just won the Super Bowl. Because guess what? Life goes on.
Yeah.
And he said that was a wonderful reminder for him. As serious as this is, and as much as you want to put your whole heart and soul into your job, there are bigger things than wins or losses. There are bigger things in many ways than your job. And he was reminded very quickly by his 3-year-old and his 1-year-old that dad was the most important job, not Super Bowl champion or offensive lineman. And so he found himself pushing his kids on a swing at 8:30 in the morning thinking, this is it, huh? Just won the Super Bowl. Look at what I'm doing. And so it's just another humble reminder that, as much as I love sports, I think sports is a great gateway or a great place to have these lessons learned. But sports is also not the be on end all of everything. And that goes for coaching, that goes for playing, that goes for fandom, that goes for broadcasters and the media. I think we're just looking at sports as an escape, but then also what are the lessons that we can learn that we can take with us into real life, into the things that truly matter.
Coaches, the Jamodi podcast is powered by Ballology. What's your BSA score? The Ballology Skills Assessment is the only verified skills metric endorsed by the NAIA, NJCAA, and a growing number of NCAA coaches to discover and develop the best talent for your team. This 4-minute, 40-shot test can be taken free today on the Ballology mobile app. Elevate your game. Before I let you go, I want to take you through the speed round.
Okay.
Quick questions. First thing that pops in your head, just blurt it out. You ready?
Yeah. Yes, sir. Let's
All
do
right.
it.
We're going to know you better than we ever did before. Favorite ice cream flavor?
Chocolate chip cookie dough, no doubt.
All right. This is one that in the basketball world, it's a big debate. For high school, shot clock or no shot clock?
I think shot clock. I don't like no shot clock because you'll end up with a score of like 30-28. And if coaches are smart, they'll just hold the ball for 6 minutes at a time if they want to. And college basketball used to have no shot clock. I remember those days. And Princeton back in the late 80s, they would win games 40-39 because they would just do the Princeton stall and hold the ball for 4 minutes at a time. So I'm a big fan of the shot clock, even if it's a 45-second shot clock or a 40-second shot clock. At some point, just getting a shot up so we can keep playing basketball here.
Yep. Texting or talking?
Oh, wow. It's funny. With my job at ESPN, I used to say texting all day long. Like I just was exhausted talking to people because it was my job. But now I'm more about talking to people. I think Zoom and the pandemic and in-person conversations, I don't like talking on the phone. But if you want to jump on a Zoom, I'll do that over talking on the phone. And I still like texting. I think there's still value in just getting a quick answer to someone. But I like talking. I'll say talking the way we're talking right now, where we can see each other. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
Favorite holiday?
Thanksgiving is my favorite holiday. I used to like Christmas a lot when I was little. Thanksgiving by far now, between being able to literally gorge yourself with amazing amounts of food, to watch my favorite team play every year. I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan. So to watch the Cowboys every year on Thanksgiving, that's easily and we get to be with family and friends. That's my favorite holiday.
Nice. Invisibility or super strength?
I've never had either. I wouldn't even say I have a lot of strength, much less super strength. But I feel like I could get more accomplished with invisibility.
Okay.
Super strength, what can I truly do with super strength?
Yeah.
Other than be, a superhero or an Avenger.
I mean,
I could be the Hulk.
Go find bad guys, I guess. But
and pound
if you don't want to do that.
But I think invisibility would allow me to escape and find that time, and also be able to get to places that maybe I couldn't otherwise get to. You'd have to steward invisibility well, though, because you could probably run down a pretty bad path if you're not careful.
Good point.
But I think I'd choose invisibility.
You're really thinking through these answers. It's impressive. I'm
probably going way too deeper than you want, Matt. But that's okay. It's all right.
Speed round. No.
Yeah, my speed is like a grandma speed, right? 30 miles an hour. Here we go.
If you could travel back in time, what period would you go to?
I think I would go to probably the 60s, the early to mid
Mm,
60s when the Beatles were just starting out. I'm a big
nice.
Beatles fan, and I think about 63 to 69 and the period of them and what they were able to accomplish in 6 years is unlike anything we've
Yeah.
ever seen in the music industry. I would probably go to the early 60s. It was a weird time, right? With, Cold War and President Kennedy being assassinated
Mm,
and stuff. I think the 50s were a little bit more wholesome and, everybody like mom and pop. But the 60s was a little bit rebellious and maybe similar to some of the things that we've been through in the past, decade or two. So I would probably go during, maybe to those times. Or if you really want to go back, I know I'm not supposed to give two answers.
no, it's okay.
Let's go back to biblical times.
There you
and
go.
let's just walk around when Jesus was alive in, what was it, the year 30 or whatever it
Yeah.
was, and just be around him and kind of have what is in the Bible, come to life and be around that too. So
On that note, what are your thoughts on the Chosen? Have you watched that at all? And what do you think?
I love The Chosen. I got to talk to Dallas Jenkins, the creator of it, on our
Wow.
podcast. He's a huge sports fan. So
Wow.
it was a lot of fun to talk to him. And I think it's the best thing I watched in 2021. I'm excited for season 3.
Yeah.
I think they're working on it now. I think it is a wonderful way to introduce Christ into the lexicon, if you will, of streaming service content. I think the way that they're doing it, going outside of this typical Hollywood world of, crowdfunding, crowd raising the money, and then producing it that way, and making it free and available, but only through their app, I think is genius. And I don't see a lot of people replicating it at this point.
Yeah.
But I do think a lot of people down the road would do that. And I also think when you get 400 million views of your 2 seasons, which is basically, I think, 16 episodes or whatever it is, there's clearly an appetite around the world, not just here in the United States, for content like this.
Man.
And it has to be good. The one thing I love about The Chosen is, it's really, really well done. And I've seen some things that are faith-based that aren't well done. In fact, that's how I viewed our podcast. I wanted our podcast to be a good podcast, a really well done show, not just to have it, right? I think we do that as for me as a follower of Christ. Sometimes I'm gravitating towards anything that anybody does that's faith related, but a lot of it was just not well done. It wasn't, they didn't have the money or the resources or whatever, or the talent. And I think The Chosen is one of those, when I see it, my gosh, I think this is amazingly well done in terms of the quality, in terms of the actors, in terms of the storytelling, but staying true to the scriptures. And that's wonderful. You talk about going back in time. When I watch The Chosen, that's what I feel like. I'm sure you do too.
Yeah.
Like you are, escorted back to the, biblical times. And what was it like to be around Jesus when he came and walked on this earth? It's pretty awesome.
I'd love to go into that more with you, but I got one more question that I know I need to let you go.
Absolutely. You're good.
Godfather or Star Wars, or it could be neither.
This is easy because I'm the biggest Star Wars nerd you've ever met. Started when I was 4 years old and episode 4 was released in 1977, all the way to today when I'm weeks away from Obi-Wan Kenobi coming out on Disney Plus, and I'm as excited as I was when I was 7
Do you
years
watch
old.
the like Clone Wars and things like that? You go through those? Okay.
I think what happened was I had a daughter who, when she was born, in 2004, they were just starting to bring back, the prequels had been out a little bit, and then they made the Clone Wars in 2008. It was a movie, and then it was a cartoon series on Disney. Yeah. And my daughter was 4 years old. And so we would watch the regular movies together a little bit, but she's like, Dad, I want to watch the Clone Wars. She was so drawn to the cartoon. So I would watch those with her. And suddenly I found myself, even though I was 35 at the time or whatever.
Did you enjoy it?
She loved it. I liked it. I did. Okay. I thought that it's a cartoon.
I've never gone through those, but I know like the storyline in those it's actually important.
It's like canon, as they call it.
Yeah, canon.
It stays true to what they are trying to envision this Star Wars legacy to be.
Yeah.
And yeah, they're very important because now you're seeing these new episodes of The Mandalorian and Boba Fett, and even I think Obi-Wan Kenobi, where they're taking characters from those cartoons
that I don't know because I
that you don't know,
haven't
right?
seen
And
it.
if you haven't seen them, you actually got to go kind of watch and learn. And the funny thing is, I'll be watching some of these shows, and my daughter will say, "Dad, that's Cad Bane. Do you know who that is?" And I'm like, I think I remember Cad Bane. He was in Clone Wars, right? And she's like, "Yeah, but you don't understand what was happening." And she would tell me all about the Clone Wars, and that helped me kind of understand why Cad Bane was so, ruthless as a bounty hunter. And when they brought him into Boba Fett, I was like, all right, I see what's going on here, and it's awesome. So yeah, I'm into it. I'm a pretty big nerd. I've gone to Star Wars conventions. I don't dress up as the characters, but I love Star Wars. I saw The Godfather for the first time when I was 40 years old. So I love the movies, by the way. I saw all three of them and watched them and was just blown away by them. And I understand why people are, fascinated with those movies, but nothing tops Star Wars. The Empire Strikes Back is my favorite movie of all time. I think it's also the best movie I've ever watched, if I'm being completely honest. So yeah, Star Wars, you're not going to get me to veer from that.
Just another way that you and I are like-minded. I'm the same way. This has been so much fun, just getting to talk with you in kind of in a different way, and not really even sure where the conversation would go, just based on your experiences and who you've been around. Just such a pleasure, and thank you for your time, man.
Matt, thanks for having me. I'm glad that we were able to connect, first of all, on our podcast that I do, and then to have the roles reversed and to be able to be on your show. This was a lot of fun. I'm glad we didn't have a lot of scripted content here. We just went in a bunch of different directions, and to be honest, those are my favorite type of conversations. So I appreciate you. Thanks for having me on your show.
Real quick, talk about Sports Spectrum podcast and really anything else that you're into.
Yeah, I think Sports Spectrum is the show that you were on, that I host. And, we try to bring Jesus into the sports conversation and keep him there. And there's a lot of athletes and coaches and other people that love the Lord. Faith is a very important part of their life, and obviously sports is too. So let's use sports as a way to introduce people to some of these amazing individuals that are accomplishing awesome things in the sports field, but are doing it, for the most part, doing it for a greater purpose, to glorify God. And so we have a very unique platform. We understand that, but I love what I get to do, and I would love for people to check it out. SportsSpectrum.com is the website, and Sports Spectrum's podcast is the show. I have a couple books and speak a little bit, so if anybody's interested in that type of stuff, I won't spend a lot of time on that, but you can check it out at my website, jasonromano.com. But I love for them to check out the podcast and Sports Spectrum.
Well, Jason, I just thank you so much, man. Thank you for being authentic too, and even with going to a Star Wars convention, you shared that and just unashamedly.
It was a great experience, man. I mean, I got to see I have pictures and videos of just insane visuals. Let's just put it that way, of people dressed up and all into it, and I loved it. It was so much fun. So thanks for having me, buddy.
Thank you.
Thank you for checking out today's episode. Please take a moment to subscribe to this podcast, share it with your fellow coaches, and find us on social media for what's coming up next on the Jamodi podcast. It's just a matter of doing it.